Welcome to The Roll Call, the podcast where we dive into the roles that define us. I'm your host, John Glahn. On each episode, we explore the journeys of people discovering their true roles in life, business, and beyond. Get ready for inspiring conversations about finding purpose and authenticity. Let's roll the roll call. Welcome, everyone. With me today, I have Raj Pithadia, which I'll do a quick little bio, which I don't normally do, or I haven't done, but we're going to add some real meat to who Raj is here today. So he's the president and owner of Liberty Cast Products, which is a leading non-ferrous sand casting manufacturer based locally in Sterling Heights, Michigan. Since acquiring the company in 2016, Raj has leveraged his background in materials engineering and business from Purdue University, along with his experience in aerospace casting and quality systems, to modernize operations and foster an employee-centered culture. Under his leadership, Liberty Cast has embraced continuous improvement methodologies and achieved ISO certifications, serving clients across the automotive, aerospace, defense, and industrial sectors. So, since I just blew you up with some wonderful words, I want to welcome you, Raj. I am here. This is the roll call. All are accounted for. Let's get started.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Raj, I wanted to have you on with me because we met a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years, maybe, I don't know, time flies. But met through some mutual acquaintances through a networking group. And obviously we connected right away because we both graduated from the greatest university on the earth, Purdue University.
That's right.
And there you go, boiler up, man. That was from step one, but I also fell in love with your journey. Obviously I love entrepreneurs. I love entrepreneurship. I love people that have the stones to jump in and take risk and believe in themselves. And I had my way of becoming an entrepreneur, and many others have theirs. And so yours is something that is just another wrinkle in how entrepreneurship can get started. And I'd love for you to share your journey of how the hell you got here. Without giving a full resume, but hey, how the hell did you get here? It's a cool story.
Sure. No, that's a great question. I think a lot of the stones that I had to do things on my own came from my old man, who was very pushy on doing things on your own and not having to take orders from anyone else, which is why I think he's so pleasantly stubborn as he is right now.
Yeah.
My journey started as an engineer. I also did management at Purdue, which they have a fantastic management program there as well at Purdue at Craner. But I did some process engineering work I started at Houghmet in Texas, which was a investment casting firm. They did a lot of military and commercial aircraft. But what I saw quickly was that the engineers basically lived in their ivory tower with the management. The folks on the floor really didn't have the support they needed. They didn't really feel like anyone cared. I don't think people did care up at that level, to an extent, which was different from where I grew up, because I grew up in Northwest Indiana, which is home of all the big steel mills. So a lot of my friends, a lot of their family, they worked in the steel mills, tough hours, tough everything, tough life.
Yeah.
So, I quickly saw that I could either go on the route of climbing the ladder and making it big that way, or I could try things on my own and try to build a manufacturing company that was based more around the individuals and the employees versus, bottom line profits and how can you pull as much work out of the worker as possible. So I kind of went that route with bouncing to a few different positions where I strategically wanted to get different experiences to become an entrepreneur. So I didn't want to just be the engineer who turns entrepreneur and hopes that they can learn the books, because usually that becomes a very steep learning curve. So I took roles in quality and in production to really kind of level myself out. And then the foundry that I own now had come up for sale. There were a few folks in the industry that knew that I wanted to start my own. And this particular foundry was small, family owned. They didn't want to sell out to any of the larger companies. So my friend said, hey, you got to take a look at this and see. And I'm like, that's way out of my price range. So I sold my soul to the bank and that facilitated a lot of things to get in motion where, everything worked out where I was able to buy, instead of having to start from complete scratch, and then slowly implement what I wanted to do in terms of building a culture, which would hopefully transmute into building the company based on the employee. So a lot of movements, a lot of fun, a lot of challenges, a lot of learning experiences. And I love talking to entrepreneurs like yourself because, I don't think a lot of folks on the outside, not to sound elitist, kind of realize that every entrepreneur has the stories of when they died. How many times you died? When were you, $500,000 in debt, living out of your car? Everyone has those stories, which is kind of like, to me, a rite of passage.
Yeah, I think so many things come to mind because I've been in steel mills, different versions of them, and they are gross, grimy, again, hard-nosed workers, the whole deal. And I leave there and I'm like, how in the hell can someone work in that, whether it's a caustic environment with things are in the air, and you just hear the stories of, yeah, he has cancer because he worked in a mill or whatever it was. And and to hear you take that approach to say, because they're shuttered all the time, right? In Metro Detroit, they're shut down, they're shuttered based on what the industry is doing, and then they bring them back up into these old foundries that have been, open for 80 years or something like that, and they just cobble things together, and guys come out just grimy and right, their clothes just grease and everything everywhere. And to have that, and you don't feel like the employee is any piece of that equation other than getting the job done. And so you taking and seeing that as a youngster, that you want to make that difference is incredible.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, there was one pivotal moment that really kind of put me over the fence, and that was when I was working at a foundry on a Saturday, and the guy who ran the melt shop, Frank Genovese, his daughter was getting married, and this is out in on the East Coast. And this guy is pure Italian, whole family's Italian. They're having an Italian wedding. I'm going to the wedding later in the afternoon, and I'm working in the morning. And the father is here working, and I'm like, Frank, what in the heck are you doing if there's no one else here? He goes, I had to work today. They told me I had to. If I didn't, I was going to probably lose my job. And I was like, if you're forcing an Italian to work on the day of his daughter's wedding, then I got to do something different. This isn't right. So, that Italian, I think, pushed me over the edge.
Wow. I've got plenty of times in my life to do that too. That's great. And again, I wanted to highlight too, again, just because my journey and, entrepreneurship takes on so many different forms. And for you, how old were you when you got that loan?
27 and a half.
27 and a half. So finding capital and getting it from a bank is not the easiest thing to do, especially when you're 27. You don't have assets. You don't have, all these other things. And like you said, selling your soul to the bank. Many of us don't do that till much later. And so the fact that your version of it is you saw an opportunity, you saw value in something, and you saw value in yourself and how you can make that difference. Again, mine is sugar coated. I got to waltz into mine a little bit because of the situation. And so, like I said, the harder stuff came later, but you got to learn the hard way up front, how to get this stuff done, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's awesome. So what role are you fulfilling today in the company?
I'd like to say CEO, although there are days where that changes. But, for the most part, I've got a rock star group of supervisors that have really stepped up to the plate to, run the day-to-day where the fires are managed more effectively. So I can spend more of my time working on sales, major improvement, staffing, and, navigating regulatory requirements and tariffs and things like that.
Ooh, do we go into tariffs now or later?
Hey, your podcast, your call.
I do want to come back to that to see how you're pivoting in it. But how about your role? Like you just defined it, right? That's as being the CEO. Again, people view entrepreneurship as all roses, and you're the guys with the cars, and they're the ones in the office, the corner office, and all those things, and not feeling and seeing all the other things that happen and the things that go along with being an entrepreneur. Like, how are we going to make this payroll? How am I going to pay this loan payment? Right? Um, how has it shifted? How has your role shifted? Heck, has it shifted much in the last 2 years versus 5 years versus 10 years? What's that journey been like?
I mean, I'd say the last 2 years have been a very large shift in a positive direction to get us better organized as a whole. And if you like, I can kind of go into what prompted that shift, because that is quite a story.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So this was probably around 2023, and I had been running for a good 5 years. Every year is a different wave of, okay, what's going to destroy my company this year? Is it going to be is it going to be this quality issue? And I had a pretty good year, and I was almost waiting for it. I was like, what is it going to be this year? And I had multiple office managers. I was struggling to find someone to replace my old office manager that could just manage the books. I didn't really think there was much to it. And then by the end of the year, I'd kind of gotten fed up, and I had hired an outside third party to help bridge the gap until I could find a new office manager. And they redid all of our QuickBooks to get things in motion. Coincidentally, my accountant was a private accountant. She joined a big firm, so she could no longer keep us. So, she had to pass the torch to a new company that wasn't sure exactly how to work with manufacturing books, which are very different than, retail or anything like that.
Right.
And then with the new books in place, I had a new right-hand man. I hired a plant manager to help the day-to-day things, so I could focus on the CEO things. And first quarter in, we're showing record profits. Like, it was, wow, we're crushing it. And I was checking in with the accountants and the office manager. Are you sure? I'm like, yeah, you're kicking ass. I was like, all right, great. And then second quarter came, and we're doing even better. This is to the point where I think I had lunch with you at this next to golf course, and I'm like boasting and prideful, which I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big Christian or anything like that, but I do know in the Bible it does state that pride is, I think, the largest cardinal sin, and most people kind of discount that. And I think that is one thing that I learned, is that when you boast about something, it tends to crumble just a few weeks after that. You're like, crap, why did I brag about that or talk about that? So anyway, we hit third quarter, and I'm skeptical as all can be. And I had some other third parties take a look at it, and it turns out we weren't accounting correctly. We were basically double counting our inventory. So instead of making, 100, 200 grand profits, it was actually basically losses. And I had made some very critical decisions based on having all these profits. I had hired a quality manager. I had given profit sharing programs out to our employees. I'm giving them these gobs of money, where I didn't realize until after the fact, hey, we didn't have this. If anything, we were losing. The overtime was killing us. When everyone's saying you're crushing it, I'm getting crushed. So, once I had a chance to kind of untangle this, I had gone to a new accounting service, Savant, which is a big company. They had worked to untangle things to get what we actually had by the end of the year, which was not pretty. I was in rough shape. What are we going to do? I don't have a good office manager. So luckily, my wife at the time, we had just had our first son, which, through this whole debacle, the walls are caving in, and oh yeah, I've got my first kid. I got to take care of this outfit at the end of the day. But I was so blessed that my wife came in to kind of save the day and work with the accountant. She is an engineer from Michigan, and she ended up working more in the analytical side of things with startups. And she is a whiz with numbers, and she is probably the most precise person I've ever met. She should have been an accountant. She should not have been an engineer, because John, I figure you're more like me, where you're like accuracy by volume. Let me see how many things I can get done, and if I miss half of them, I don't really care. She will never miss, and if I miss, then I will know about it.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
no, so as a pause, and then I'll let you go, like where you've gone from here, was I do remember that, because it was, and I didn't take it as certainly prideful or boasting, but it was there's that part when you're the owner and you're like, holy shit, this is actually working. Like we're doing some awesome things, and and we're accustomed to being in peer groups, like CEO peer groups, right? Whether it be EO or visionary forum or something along those lines. And so when you're shoulder to shoulder with other business owners, like we all want to celebrate when we're doing well, right? And then also then be there when the shit hits the fan for each other. And I do remember that when this happened, and it was like, room, right? Like, I got to dive back into the business. I remember like, hey, let's go golfing. Like, no, like, the fun days are over. We got to get our head back in this. And so, I love that. I don't love it, but it is again, how we are tested in those moments, right? It is when we're tested to see if we can handle it, right? You have a kid on the way. None of that, I'm a firm believer that none of this stuff happens when life is great and grand and if nothing else is going on, right? It's when everything is crushing you at the same time is when you're tested. So where'd you take it from here?
yeah, so my wife coming in, to kind of save the day with the accountant, that got our books back in motion so that we could better track, okay, how are we doing? I had to cut basically every cost that I could think of. So all the fun entertainment clubs like Vistage, I shouldn't say entertainment, but they do add a lot of value.
Yeah.
Any expenditure I could cut was cut. Cut my quality manager, cut my plant manager. So I'm taking on all these extra roles while trying to scrounge and see what we can do to run the shop, run the quality, run everything without losing my head, and find time to get home so that I could not sleep overnight with the newborn crying and screaming all night. So, that definitely took an emotional hit, as you can imagine, trying to get through things. And, what we ended up doing with looking at our books and seeing, okay, well, where are we at? Where do we need to be? And working backwards. My wife was able to start up a spreadsheet that just showed, okay, let's look at our margins per part. And we're a jobbing shop. So it's difficult for a lot of job shops when you're running 5,000 different parts a year to take the time and map out, okay, what's my margin on this part? Usually, well, I know kind of rough weight of it. It should take about this much time. Here's the price. Here's the lead. Here you go. But in actually mapping things out and working backwards, we were able to find, okay, here's where our prices actually need to be. So I had to raise prices. I had to lose customers in order to keep going. And I know every entrepreneur is always thinking, okay, well, if I just get the revenue, I get my fixed costs, that percentage down, how much it impacts, and I get to grow based on lower margin. Everyone does that. I do that.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to realize that I can't really do that so much anymore.
Yeah.
We've got to be a little bit more strategic, and we may not need to grow that fast. We can make, a profit with a smaller crew with the right product lines, and that leads to less quality issues and less delivery issues. So, we basically downsized and built from the ground up. I was going to hire another plant manager, and because the ones I had hadn't worked, and I was forking out a ton of dough for guys who on paper were great. They had great success stories, multiple degrees, all the good stuff. So this time around, against the advice of pretty much every entrepreneur I met, was I'm going to take the three guys who've been with me for a good 4 or 5 years who want it, who've now shown they want it, and give them the role. Outline, here's your responsibilities. Here's what you're going to be doing. Do you want this? And they took it and ran with it. I mean, I'll be honest, I was very hesitant on it myself, but they've shown that, the extra time they can give to fill that role is far better than anything I could have expected.
Wow. So many business nuggets in there that books are written around. And like you said, some people take advice in different ways, but, unpacking that first part, which is addition by subtraction. Many people think that, to your point, to grow, that means you're growing revenue. Well, most people forget about you can grow your profit. That's actually how businesses run, is profit. And so you can call it trimming the fat, cutting the fat, like actually understanding how your business is running. I think so many of us as an entrepreneur, like, hey, it's just, like for the first 3 or 4 years of our business, we doubled every year, just grit, hard work, and, couldn't tell you why. But then once you start getting more complex and not trying to be the one that does everything, because you could, I'm sure at one point you were doing every role inside the building, or you've done it, or it, right? And so the further you get away from that, you've got other people that have to do that work. And if you don't see, and if you're not tracking those numbers to see how they're doing, how the profit is, like by product line, it's amazing what percent. I'd love to know the percentage of companies that don't know that information, and they're growing just in spite of themselves, right? Or running in spite of running the business in spite of themselves. So that's a great nugget. And then, as you are, I'd love to come back to, actually, speaking of roles, bringing a spouse into a business, because I do have clients that have family in the businesses. That is not easy. And I remember when it was like when you had said that you were doing that, and I remember talking to our business chair, Bob Holland, and I was like, oh no. Poor guy. Like, are you sure this is the right idea? Because some of us, again, it's just, it can work out great, but that's just a tough, when you're blending roles of family and business, that's just a tough deal. So were there any bumps in the road in that, or?
I mean, you're absolutely right. Everyone was telling me you're crazy. You bring your spouse in, you may as well get the divorce paperwork, now. And I was definitely concerned with, how, if we're butting heads at home, how much are we going to butt heads when we're working side by side all day without a break from each other?
Yeah.
But Carrie did a fantastic job of pretty much everything. She didn't put her foot down, to the point where I couldn't manage, I couldn't control things. She was there to provide the information from a data-based perspective instead of an emotional based. And it actually had the opposite effect of what people were talking about, because up until then, I'd come home and I would complain about things from work and complain about customers and quality and people and all sorts of things. And she'd kind of think that I was this mean guy who's always pissed off at work all the time about everything. Yeah. And then I found that she was the one during our walks complaining more about, employees and customers than I was. I'm like, see, honey, I'm not that crazy guy that you thought. Yeah. She goes, now that I'm in there and I see it, I see, okay. And for her to kind of admit that she might have been wrong on one occasion, like, I'll take that for the next couple of years, because that's probably all.
That went to the bank, yeah.
Yeah. So for having her in the company just to see how things were going, because, at that time it's okay, now I don't have cash. And on top of that, my line of credit with my SBA loan had expired and they didn't tell me. And so it's a month late and they're saying, oh yeah, hey, sorry, we forgot. We didn't tell you about your line of credit expiring and we need you to pay $60,000 to close this out. Can you please pay us right away? It's like, oh yeah, let me see what I got in my pocket here. So yeah, then I was scrounging for cash. And so, I'm looking at what are our funds, our retirement funds, how much can we put in? If I didn't have Carrie in the business, she probably would have said flat out, no, you're crazy, you're not touching. But for her to be able to see the numbers and say, okay, well, you've got this in your accounts receivable. Your receivables are so high. As long as we can get those down, we'll be able to make it work. And my folks are great. I know from a pride perspective, I hate to say, hey, I had my old man help me out. But when we didn't have a bank to give us a line of credit, he was there in a second to basically run to the bank. How much do you need wired? Okay. And we got to pay him back, which was a good feeling to get my dad back, a few months later and say, hey, appreciate it, Pop. Thanks. Just never again.
Yeah, no, many more awesome entrepreneurial nuggets, right? Again, having your wife in the business is a couple things. One, there's trust there, right? At that point, I remember, because you're like, who do I trust now, right? You can trust her. And she has a skill set you don't have. And so leaning into that, I'm sure it made her feel great, because like she provided a huge value to get stuff back on track, right? And so how does that, that's a whole different thing. We very rarely are mixing our professional and home life. And so when we can do that well, there's just a whole nother level of respect that we get. And I'll come back to a huge kudos to you. Many business owners, again, they all want to hear and talk about how, and I've done this too, like, hey, I'm not working in my business. I get to golf a couple days a week, right? I've got it's running itself. Like that's the top of the, they call it the business owner seat, right? And no one wants to tell the dirty, gritty things. Like you're doing it on open air here to say, yeah, I went back, tail between your legs, or whatever, and just asked for help. Right? I know so many of us are like, how do I figure this out? I'm going to max every credit card out to figure this out. When if we just go ask the people that love us and we trust, like we can actually get there.
Mhm.
And so, thank you for being vulnerable and saying that, because that pride, not many people would allow that to happen. So that's awesome. You do have great family and great support system to be able to step in and help.
Sure. Yeah.
Gosh, how many other nuggets were in there? So back to, your trusted employees, back to trust, where you're saying, everyone says, no, don't try to build someone up within your own company. They don't have the skill set, or they don't have the degrees or whatever, but they want it and they're trusted. They fit your core values. All right, that's what we can work with versus some unknown who you're going to spend hundreds of $1,000s, depending on how long you hang on to them. Those are expensive learnings, expensive mistakes, right?
Mhm.
So, there's there's the other part where I think the best growing companies, they make decisive people moves, right? And that can mean hiring slow, hiring well, hiring into the future, planning your future, and also cutting the fat when you need to, right? Now, most people think that's what that means, but there's a piece to that. But being clear on what you're doing and why you're doing it with your people, because that's how you make your money, is your people, right? So great learnings for everyone here, because everyone has their own path, and again, everyone has an opinion to tell you as you're sitting, right? And you as the owner have to make that call, and you got to have, I'll stop saying stones, you got to have the balls to make the call that's going to be the right thing for you, whether they tell you it's a good idea or not. Going back to I know we talked a lot about business and we talked a little bit about the role in the family. How are things shifting now that you're a couple years into fatherhood and your role on that side of the fence?
Family life, I would say, is pretty stable. We're expecting our second child here in November.
Congratulations.
Thanks. So it's good because we kind of wanted to have children that weren't too far apart in age, so that they can, wrestle around and intermingle, that sort of thing. And Karen and I have done a good job in balancing our home and work life, just to try to make sure we're both managing our own needs effectively. So, I usually get a good amount of free time in the evenings or on the weekends to do whatever, whether that's go golf or work out, and then trade back and forth. So, I know some entrepreneurs that have taken the approach where it's, well, I'm going to be working my 16-hour days. When I get home, I need dinner and I need to sleep, that sort of thing. I know my old man and the Indian core values are basically work, work, work when you're the guy until you can't stand. But I've learned to, take more breaks during work days, allow things to kind of fall through the cracks as they may, and just manage what you can do. Find time to be home and come home at a, cutoff time when work is over. That's it. No more work.
Yeah.
Focus on family stuff and get things moving and take care of your wife as much as you can.
Yeah, no, that's, we bring so much of our childhood into the rest of our life, right? And what we see and mirror and mimic, and again, mostly good, some bad. And now you're creating your own path for you and your own children.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was saying, now that my son's kind of walking and talking a little bit, I can wrestle with him. It's a difference in wanting to come home now, versus before, when he's just kind of this pooping machine and just constantly crying. You're like, I have to deal with this crying at work, and now I'm coming home to the same crying diapers to change out. And it's just, that's really what rags on you. Where now it's completely different. Where I want to get home, I want to be home, be with him, and be around my family and my dogs and everything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is just a shift in the mindset, right? I'm 4 kids deep, and um, we wanted to have kids, close together as well. And we started that way, and then we didn't. So we started over later, and it's hard to not get down on how hard life is with kids and no sleeping and all these things. But that shift in mindset changes everything. And even with this baby number 2, this is speaking from experience here. Keep that same attitude of wanting to come home, and that's amazing. It's not a pooping machine anymore, right?
Right.
The next one isn't, right? It's a different. There's still a love. I mean, you're saying it to be funny, but it's just different. And you always look back and you're like, how the hell did we do this? Like now looking back in 2023, when you went through all that shit, how the hell did we do it? And you look back at what we did, right? It's just amazing how you can tackle some other difficult things in life. So one, congratulations.
Thanks.
2, I want to do 2 more things before we close. Number 1, I do want you to plug your company. I want to know, like, I know you're in a niche side of the casting business. So I want to make sure to plug that. Who are your target clients? What do you do really well, etc. Let's do that, and then we'll go to the next part.
Yeah, Liberty makes low volume sand castings. Low volume meaning prototype or small runs. We specialize in aluminum up to about 2,500 pound castings, and copper, brass, and bronze up to about 1,000 pounds. So generally speaking, we're quick, we're affordable, and customer service is our number one thing. People always say that one thing we do differently is that we provide all of our customers with a custom portal so they can see where their parts are at in our process at any given time, so they can rest assured they will receive their product on time.
Awesome. So what type of clients should be looking for your work?
Defense, probably about 50% defense in our market right now. The rest are automotive, aerospace, and industrial applications.
Awesome. And shoot, I did want to end in a timely fashion, but I forgot to come back to tariffs. How about in 2 to 3 minutes? How's it affecting you right now?
Raw material is probably the biggest effect because most of the aluminum ingot is produced out of the United States and Canada and Mexico. So with the tariffs, there's a big impact on the raw materials. I'd say 20% of our customer base is in Canada. So there's a lot of back and forth of when can we buy, what can we buy. So from the purchasing standpoint, yeah, there are some major difficulties. On the flip side, I'm seeing a lot of RFQs come in. I'm seeing a lot of opportunities where people are moving things from overseas back home. So I think if anything, in my opinion, I think it's a good thing. If other countries are going to tariff us for certain things, we need to do something to tell them knock it off and get back to a free trade system.
Okay, well, thanks. I didn't give that enough service because I know I can't. I'm imagining there's been some sleepless nights, right? Because it's uncertainty at this point, right? If you know what's happening, then you can make a plan. But when it's moving every other day, it's hard to be intentional, I imagine.
Yeah, to an extent. And when it moves this quickly, I don't pay much attention to it. I'm more focused on, okay, we're not busy, but we're not slow. Let's focus on what we can do to improve now and get ready for what potentially could be coming down the road.
Awesome. All right. Well, in closing, what I like to do is, and I know we already touched on some of these, but I like to ask, what's one failure or mistake, or what's one thing that was very negative? And I know we just went through some, so maybe something fresh, or you can come back to that. That was a key learning for you that maybe others could learn from.
Purpose comes to mind. The first couple of years, you think, okay, how can I make money? What am I going to do with this money? How do I get there? How can I push? When I think I've learned now that the better focus should be on purpose. What am I doing and how am I affecting the people around me? How am I affecting the workers on the floor? How am I giving them purpose? So creating game plans on what are they doing, how are they learning, where's their pay at, how do they get the pay they want, to see them grow almost as if they're children, which at times they can act like children, but having that purpose is far more fulfilling than the idea or even having the cash that comes in. To see each individual person grow with their strengths, and tackle challenges that they probably wouldn't have been able to do. They came from working at a garbage factory, or they came at working from landscape, to see now, okay, they're in a managerial position and I've helped them get there and they've pushed to get there. That I think is the bee's knees that I failed to see when I started out earlier on.
Amazing. Purpose-driven life, what you can actually get out of it.
Yeah.
Thank you for a great nugget, Raj. This was, as always, they're always better than I ever think they would be. Thank you for being you. Thanks for being a friend. And hopefully we've helped some people by hearing your journey. So best way to reach out to you and casting and Liberty Cast, sorry.
Probably email. Actually, you can check our website out, libertycastproducts.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, again, thanks, Raj. I know we'll get out and hit a golf ball soon. I believe that's a wrap.
Thanks for tuning in to The Roll Call with John Glahn. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe for more insightful conversations. Remember, discovering your true role in life is a journey worth exploring each and every day. Until next time, keep defining your path and living your authentic self. This is John Glahn signing off.